myself and reflected upon what was it that made my experience a little bit different. And it really stemmed from my childhood. And I grew up on the second floor of a mansion, which sounds lovely, in a small country town of Auburn, Nebraska, population 3,000. And I say second floor because the first floor was converted by my family into a thriving restaurant with banging and clanging and late night
Wow.
bar crowds beneath my bedroom every night from three
Wow.
years old on. And what I wanted more than anything was to feel seen and heard without even being able to express it in words. And if someone would have asked me, who listens to you? It would not have been my parents.
Oh.
Well, I was so fortunate, though, there was one person that did, and that was my Grandma Helga.
Mm.
And in her presence, it was as though there was a warm, safe bubble surrounding us. And savory aromas wafting in from the kitchen added extra comfort. And she would presence herself in a way that I felt deeply heard and seen.
Welcome back to the In the Lead show. My name is Jennifer Sang, and you're listening to episode number 23. In today's episode, I get to talk to Terri Lonowski. She is the founder of Soulful Listening, a TEDx speaker, and an accomplished thought leader whose body of work is evolutionary communication is timely, impactful, and deeply relevant. Inspired by her grandma Helga and through insights gained as chair of the American Counseling Association Foundation, representing over 50,000 professional counselors, along with other significant professional contributions, she created an easily repeatable, holistic approach for communication on a deeper, more meaningful level. The 5 elements of soulful listening provide a roadmap to connecting in a way that leaves others feeling heard deeply. Terri has had the honor of leading national human centered design teams, which embraced empathy and design thinking to showcase workforce innovations at the White House not once, but twice. She'll take you on an engaging ride through inspiring stories and leave you with actionable steps to embody in your own life, both at work and at home. I loved the conversation with Terri because we went on a journey of what it means to truly listen in a soulful way, which speaks directly to my heart. I feel like whether we're talking about a corporate setting or we're talking about our personal lives, I feel like at the core, what's missing is that deeper listening. And as a professional coach myself, I know that's one of the tenets of being a certified coach is really having that ability to drop in and listen more deeply with empathy, with your whole being, and being able to provide those insights and maybe little nudges that people need to be able to get unstuck or to be able to maybe unlock their own creative genius. So, this conversation with Terri was a delight, and I think you guys will find a lot of value out of it. You can reach Terri at soulfullistening.com and check out some of her body of work. I think you'll really enjoy it. And I think there's a lot of actionable things that you can take out from her roadmap to soulful listening and apply that to your organizations, your teams, your families, your relationships to develop better relationships and have more of that deeper listening and deeper connections with those around you. So, welcome back to 2022 and welcome to the show. Welcome back to the In the Lead show. My name is Jennifer Sang, and today I am joined by Terri Lonowski. She is the founder of Soulful Listening and a TEDx speaker. So, welcome to the show, Terri.
Thank you, Jen. I am so happy to be here.
I am so happy too. I'm really excited that Sean was able to connect us. I mean, as soon as he said soulful listening, I was like, huh, okay, I need to meet this woman, Terri, that he has spoken so highly about because soulful listening just speaks directly to my soul. So I'm really excited about our conversation today and how leaders might be able to use some of the things that you've developed in their everyday lives. So I really can't wait.
Beautiful, beautiful introduction. Thank you. And thank you to Sean for connecting the two of us.
Yes, I love it. I love when little things like that happen in life and you just kind of get connected. So I would love to hear a little bit more about yourself, who you are and what's brought you to where we are today.
Right, right. So again, you'd said my name and founder of Soulful Listening. And, I think it would be helpful to kind of get a little bit of background on what led me to create Soulful Listening. Uh, I was working as a consultant for major teams across the nation that were working on, improving the way that they provide services to businesses using a methodology called human-centered design.
Mm.
And as I was working with them, we ended up in the White House a couple of times with the improvements that teams had made. And I noticed how stale programs had turned on their ear. And if you're not familiar with what human centered design is, at the core of it is using empathy to improve the services that they provide to their customers. And, then I reflected on that, and what helped me thrive despite the odds in my own life. And I realized there were major missing pieces in how we communicate. And I also was doing some research. I had major projects with US Department of Labor teams from across the nation. And I did some research and I discovered that over half of the American population is lonely. That's according to Cigna. It's broke my heart.
Yeah.
And then further research, revealed that the health impact of loneliness is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
And the health implications are now, uh, they exceed those of obesity. So this was so serious that I could not turn a blind eye. And so I did some deep soul searching myself and reflected upon what was it that made my experience a little bit different. And it really stemmed from my childhood. And I grew up on the second floor of a mansion, which sounds lovely, in a small country town of Auburn, Nebraska, population 3,000. And I say second floor because the first floor was converted by my family into a thriving restaurant with banging and clanging and late night
Wow.
bar crowds beneath my bedroom every night from 3
Wow.
years old on. And what I wanted more than anything was to feel seen and heard without even being able to express it in words. And if someone would have asked me, who listens to you? It would not have been my parents.
Oh.
Well, I was so fortunate, though, there was one person that did, and that was my Grandma Helga.
Mm.
And in her presence, it was as though there was a warm, safe bubble surrounding us, and savory aromas wafting in from the kitchen added extra comfort. And she would presence herself in a way that I felt deeply heard and seen.
Mm. Wow.
And so that has stayed with me my entire life, even though beginning in that family situation with all the chaos and wild families dysfunction, by having one person that listened to me in a deep, meaningful way, the trajectory of my life changed forever.
Wow. I could just feel kind of the warmth as you were talking about your grandmother, how beautiful that story is. I love hearing it for the second time. It was just so amazing. And all I could think was like this, there's this chaos and being able to be that presence and that rooted, grounded force amongst all of that. I mean, what a tremendous gift to be able to experience that and be able to now, teach others as well.
Yeah, and we could be that for others in our own life. And there were, I'm remembering one conversation with Grandma Helga that was particularly important. And I had gone in for my senior high school guidance counselor meeting where you talk about what's next for you and what your career might look like. And again,
Yep.
I'm from a small country town, and my guidance counselor said to me, Terri, you're a small town girl. You get lost
Wow.
in a big city like Lincoln, Nebraska.
My
Your
goodness.
best bet is to go to secretarial school and work for your family restaurant.
Wow.
Yeah. And that would have been
Wow.
a death sentence for my spirit.
Yeah. Wow.
And so
Wow.
I had that sleepless nights. And for an 18-year-old to have sleepless nights, that's you know there's something wrong inside. There's a
Mhm.
dissonance, there's an agitation.
Yeah.
So I went to Grandma Helga, and she was a woman really ahead of her time. She was twice widowed, a successful in business, and she knew how to step away and take care of herself, which was so rare in that time. And so when I presented this story to Grandma Helga, she kind of reared back and presenced herself, and she said, "Terri, look at all I've done without education.
Mm.
Think of what you can do with it."
Wow.
And in that
Yeah.
moment, the trajectory of my life shifted forever.
Yeah, and it's those little moments. And
Mhm.
that's what's interesting to me, especially when you're talking about soulful listening and connections with others, is it's not usually like the big um really poignant events maybe that you would necessarily stand out in your mind, but it's those little things that we can do for each other, for ourselves on a daily on in our daily lives that can
Yeah,
help change the course of somebody's direction and give them open them up to possibilities. That's what was
yeah.
coming up for me was when your counselor told you that it was limiting your possibilities. Your grandmother was helping you open up to all the possibilities.
That's so beautifully said. And holding the space for possibility for another is
Mhm.
really a powerful gift.
Yeah,
It's really a powerful gift.
really
And
is.
one of these conversations, as you pointed out, can change the trajectory of a life. And I would
Yeah,
say the world forever.
yeah, yeah. I happen to
Yeah.
agree with that.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, how would you take those same principles and apply that maybe to a corporate setting? Let's say that you're a leader in an organization and you're wanting to develop more of that empathy. You're wanting to connect more with your team. I hear a lot about engagement. We want to
Hmm.
make sure people are engaged, people are connected, people feel seen and heard and all these things. But I often see a disconnect. Like it doesn't feel like we say it, but we don't feel it. So I'm curious, how does soulful listening come into maybe that type of setting?
That is such a great, rich question. And I'll get to that. I think what might be helpful first is for me to just kind of skim over the five elements
Oh,
of
yes,
soulful
please
listening.
do.
And then
Yep.
I'll kind of embed the context of a corporate
Yep.
setting. That
Yeah.
might be a
Sounds
good way
good.
to just kind of like um, sequence that. So
Yeah.
the first element of soulful listening is self-care. And we don't often hear self-care connected with the quality of conversation, but it
Yes.
is to me foundational. And
Yes.
it's more than a bubble bath, although it could include that.
Right.
But it's really think about a time when you've had like a few days when you've had enough rest and you've eaten good food. Aren't you more emotionally available for others?
Yes. Yeah.
Certainly.
Hmm.
And then when we also look at, what kind of self-talk is going on? How are we talking to ourselves?
It's a big one. That
Yeah.
is a big one. Some of us have very old, very negative self-talk patterns.
Yeah.
I
And that
agree.
bleeds over into our
Hmm.
interactions with others,
Yeah.
certainly.
Yeah.
And another thing that I like to talk about in the bucket of self-care is setting healthy boundaries.
Yes.
When we
Yes.
look at that, when we set healthy boundaries, we take care of our, needs. We
Mhm.
really can be more present for our conversations, which leads into the second element of soulful listening, which is becoming fully present.
Mhm. Yep.
Becoming fully present. Imagine we've all been in situations where we can almost see a bubble above a person's head with the laundry list of things they're thinking about. We
All the
feel it.
time.
We
Yep.
feel it. And
Yep.
so to become present sometimes sounds just a little abstract. So I would love to share with your listeners one way that I like to become present.
Sure.
Okay. So first of all, check in with your body right now. How does it feel? And maybe not now, like move around a little bit, just kind of move
Mhm.
around a little bit. And now we're going to take 3 intentional breaths. The way that we'll do that is we'll breathe in through our nose, we'll hold, and we'll breathe out through our mouth. And as we're doing this, I invite you to notice the warmth in your heart area. So let's begin. In through your nose, hold. Out through your mouth. Again, in through your nose, hold. Out through your mouth. And a third time. In through your nose, hold. Out through your mouth. Notice your body now. Wiggle
Yeah,
your
it
toes.
feels so much less stress. It's funny. I was actually, while I was doing this, I was having a flashback to the first time I did this ever in my life, which was in therapy. And I remember I almost had like a panic attack afterwards because it gave me a feeling and sensation that I didn't know existed because I had never taken the time to really stop and do some of those
Right,
deep breaths
right.
to really feel your body just kind of become more grounded. Such a powerful tool.
Exactly. And so, as you had mentioned, we are all more present now. The energy has shifted, certainly between the two of us, and I imagine your
Mhm,
listeners as well.
mhm.
And so, when we take care of ourselves and we become fully present, we bring a quality of grace and compassion into every interaction.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that leads us to the third element of soulful listening, which is kind of a hybrid of active listening and empathy.
Mm.
So if these two had a child, it would be this element. and
I love it.
and it's all in. It's where we listen with every fiber of our
Mm.
being, through every source we have available, through our
Mhm.
intuition, our eyes,
Yes.
our ears.
Mhm.
And the Urban Dictionary defines this type of listening as quantum listening.
Yes. Mhm.
And when we listen on this deeper level, we often gain insights into how we might be helpful to another,
Yeah.
especially when we enter a conversation with a sense of curiosity and
Mhm.
openness, as opposed to playing out both sides of a conversation
Yeah.
in our head that may have in the
Mhm.
past sounded something like, oh, he'll say this and I'll say that. It's going to end like
Mhm.
this,
Mhm. Yeah.
which never
We're
turns out well.
making a lot of assumptions. And one thing I see a lot,
Yeah.
especially in tech, is we have a lot of problem solvers.
Mhm.
People find it hard to lead with curiosity because they are so conditioned to solving problems. And I see that a lot. And that's something that I work with people a lot to try and untrain kind of that initial behavior and reaction of wanting to just solve the problem,
Right.
not really bringing in the curiosity. Especially, I see it a lot in people in leadership positions who take over and want to just get something done instead of empowering people. Um, so I see that as being, all of these different components being really helpful to help you be more curious.
Yes, yes. And when you enter with that higher degree of emotional intelligence and that openness, oftentimes something will be revealed,
Mhm.
maybe a need that a person has. And we may find a place where we can be helpful to another. We all have access to a variety of resources where we can really get up underneath somebody's wings and help them out. And I
Yeah.
love a quote by the Dalai Lama, and it indicates that our prime purpose in this life is to help others.
Mm.
And so when we embrace that, and this leads to the fourth element of soulful listening, which is the secret sauce. It's taking inspired action. And as I
Um,
had mentioned, a need may be revealed during a deep,
mhm.
connected conversation. And then you
Yeah.
can be in a position to be powerful and provide assistance.
Right.
Maybe it's making a phone call, maybe it's making a connection, maybe it's looking up information, whatever the case may be.
Or maybe just to listen, right? Maybe that's all the person needs is someone to be there.
That's it.
Just,
That's it. Because it's
yeah.
so rare that
Yeah.
real listening is occurring.
Yeah.
And then to wrap it all up, the fifth element is the feedback loop. That's letting a person know you've taken inspired action on their behalf. No strings attached.
Now tell me why that is particularly important in kind of this model that you have. Like, what does
Right.
that feedback loop do for the connection, soulful listening, all of that?
Okay, so let me invite you to think back to a conversation that you may have had in the past where somebody's all in, they're listening, they're nodding their head. You kind of like filleted yourself out and bore your soul and, vulnerably expressed a need that you had. And the person nodded their head and everything. And then they left and you never heard anything back. I mean, it just falls short of
Mhm.
what real connection looks like and is experienced. And so when these 5 elements are repeated, it embeds integrity and confidence within a relationship. So that is the defining difference.
Yeah. I was also feeling like trust and
Absolutely.
safety in a lot of ways comes from trust. So I can see how that would be an important component in building connections and relationships with others.
Right. And so you asked me, how does this apply to the corporate setting?
Yes.
Very, very directly. It can be a very powerful component of increasing human performance, quite
Mm.
bluntly. And so imagine, you know, each day this kind of interaction is going on.
Mhm.
If somebody brings to you an idea
Mhm.
and action is taken upon it, well, the next time, and that you let the employer know, hey, I've got your back and this is what's going on. Imagine the fertile ground that sets.
Yeah. I Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that I've thought a lot about. And I'm thinking from a corporate standpoint, we like to see numbers. We like to see how have we moved the needle? How have we increased, again, engagement,
Mm-hmm.
satisfaction, retention is always something looked at. How do you see that connecting with kind of corporate's need to want to have data, be able to measure it? Are there things that we
Right.
can measure and have
I mean,
tangible outcomes?
you mentioned retention.
Mm.
Okay, I'll give an example. I like to tell stories, so I'll do a little storytelling, and then we'll connect that. Um, Nick is a young man. He's in his early 30s. Known him for like 10 years. Been a friend of the family, and he would always kind of come to me for like advice or to let me check in to see how his career was going. So I saw him at
Mhm.
an event, and he goes, "Terri, do you have some time?" I go, "Absolutely, Nick." And so I could tell he needed to get something off his chest. And I was like, "Well, how are things going?" He goes, "Well," and he's a really bright guy from a top tier university,
Mm.
multi gifted. And he goes, "Well, things are okay." But I go, "Oh," I
Mm.
go, "Tell me more. I'm really curious." He goes, "Well, I've tried offering my ideas a couple of times and they've just, nobody's listening to me. And so, I mean, I do the bare minimum because I can and kind of get away with it." I go, "But it feels like it doesn't even matter that I'm
Mm.
there."
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so, I mean, that is a powerful story. And so you can imagine what Nick ended up doing.
Mm.
He contracted.
Mm.
His genius inside remained inside while he was at that organization. All the time he was doing what he needed to do to meet the measured marks,
Mhm.
but that difference making that he had within him was held at bay because he felt like it didn't even matter.
Yeah. And
And
that's
so, yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
I was just going to say that's one of the things that I kind of see the most that's lacking in especially organizations and corporations is that again we want people to bring their whole selves, we want people to bring their full potential, we want to unlock those things and remove barriers so that can come forward because that's when we're at our best. But it always seems very difficult to implement, or I don't know if it's like systems or policies or whatever, but it just always seems like we know what needs to be done, but I don't know if we've really gotten there yet. I don't know if you see the same thing or feel the same way, but
Yeah, I do. And I feel like Soulful Listings offers a roadmap on how to do that. And if we're
Mhm.
interacting with one another in this way, it sets the stage for opening up access to the greater knowing within a person. So let me give an example. There was a gentleman that I worked with. His name is Jerry. We worked together for like 15 years. And I've always communicated in the soulful listening way, although it's not been called that until,
Right.
a few years ago. And so we had a way of like connecting. So every morning he would come into my office and it would take 5 minutes. So it's not like this is, and it's not a therapy session. It is not anything like that, but you kind of get to know a person. And as the safety is established, the openness also comes in. So anyway, Jerry came into my office this one morning. His face was a little beet red, and I thought, oh, there's something going on. So he sat down. I took a few deep breaths, just got centered. No big announcement needed to be made that the breathing is going on. And I said, Jerry, what's going on? He goes, they just don't understand. They just don't understand. I go, you can tell me just a little bit more. Yeah. As it turns out, he was doing multiple reports with the same information, and it was bogging him down, which was taking him away from doing the other work that really would be like game changing.
Yeah.
And we were a satellite office to a large national organization. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, what? And then entering with, rather than just shutting him down, say, well, we can't do anything about it, just suck it up. Mm-hmm. It was like, okay, Jerry, what might we do differently? He goes, and then he got quiet, kind of mm-hmm. got inside himself. And then he came up with a great solution. Mm-hmm. And so then here's where the inspired action comes to play. I said, okay, Jerry, that is a great idea. I'm going to take that forward and I'll let you know how it goes. And yeah. So the reason I needed to take it forward is I held a position that would stand a better chance of being heard.
Yeah.
And so then I didn't take credit for Jerry's great idea, but what I did was I elevated it. And then I periodically would go back to him and say, well, okay, here's where it is right now.
Yeah.
And so then he can relax and know, okay, she's got my back. I'm going to still do what I need to do while we're waiting for this to play out. And then as a result of his great idea, the policy was changed nationwide.
Wow.
And so
that's amazing.
Yes. And so, story after story happens, but you see where rather than confining him to just do what you're told, mm-hmm. he had a safe space where he could come in, beet red and vent. Yeah. But it wasn't a place to just vent to be venting. It was vent and then offer a solution and then know that you're going to have somebody backing you.
Yeah.
So
well,
that
also,
plays
I
out
hear
now.
Empowerment too. I hear being, enabling people to be empowered to have that, like you said, the courage, because there's that safety to be able to express those things. I always get nervous, right? If people aren't wanting to, if they're having reservations about going to the big bosses and, sharing something, an idea, to me, that always tells me there's some kind of safety issue, some lack of trust, something there to look at. But what I loved you were talking about was curiosity. And mm-hmm. for me as a coach, like that's everything that we do. That's the first thing that we think of is how do we shift into that curiosity? And it's great because you could have easily said, he came in there and said, I'm having this problem. You could have said, well, you need to do X, Y, Z. Right. And that would not be empowering if you said, this is what I need you to do. Instead, you said, what can be done? What are the possibilities? And he was able to bring forward a great idea, which then you were able to support and help push forward. To me, that sounds like the perfect leadership dynamic and way that is a very empowering one as well. So that was all that I was hearing from that story.
Right. And it can be done on just one-on-one basis, mm-hmm. case-by-case basis. But the ripple effect is quite substantial. Yes. Just imagine how that plays out. Mm-hmm. And then once you learn how to do this, or once you are being this way in one mm-hmm. setting of your life, it transfers into all settings of your life. Yeah. I did a keynote for top leadership, I don't know, a couple months ago. And I was just so encouraged when I was reminded how transferable this is when attendees were, committing to, implementing soulful listening in their work environment. And they also were taking it home and going to have conversations with their spouse or their children in this higher level way.
Yeah. Well, also what I've noticed in my own life and journey is through therapy, you actually use a lot of these principles with yourself. There's a lot of exploration. There's a lot of curiosity. There's a lot of building even vulnerability within yourself to be able to sit with and be present with everything from your experience, right? Even the really tough stuff, right? That most people say, oh, no, we should just push that away. We don't want to think about that. When you show up for yourself in that way, I found that it's a lot easier to show up for others in that same way. So I personally just try and use especially therapy as a way for me to practice that, where it's about really being present, fully present with yourself in all the things, everything. And how easily then it becomes, I can sit that way and be that way with someone else to help them. One of my favorite quotes by Brene Brown is on her Dare to Lead podcast. She was telling this story about, compassion, which is a lot of what I hear kind of as a thread through the soulful listening, is really about helping people to sit in the dark. So when you can sit in the dark yourself, you can then start to help others. It's not about turning the light on for them. It's not about showing them the way out. It's about teaching them to be able to sit there in all of it and really connect and have that deeper soulful kind of connection, to then be able to make your own empowered choices, decisions. But teaching people, I think that's what's really lacking in our society, to be frank, is I don't think we are very good at sitting in those dark places. It's like we want to fix it, or we want to go away. We want it, anything around mental health. I hear it so much where it's like, I just need to get over that. And it's like, well, what if we learn just to sit with it in the dark and we were okay with that?
Yeah. Well, and then that, you mentioned compassion and self-compassion and accepting all of you and accepting all of another person. I mean, how beautiful is that? And, our very humanity thrives when we feel seen and heard and supported by others. And it's not when just our absolutely perfect parts are seen and heard and supported by others. It's when all of us, and then the realization that, we're perfectly imperfect, each one of us. And we've gone through bumps and challenges along the way. And there's a richness in that it could be brought to the corporate setting, because there may be an insight from that challenge, whatever that challenge was. And, at a minimum, tenacity to thrive through it. And so to have that safe container in which, a person can bring forth their great talents. And, I'm a firm believer that we are in a point in our lives, globally, that we really need the very best of each of us coming forward. The challenges are significant enough that this is no time to be messing around.
I agree. I feel like, wow, we're at a point where there's a big cliff coming. We need a lot more to help build. I look at it as like building a bridge, like building that bridge to connect whatever is disconnected, either in ourselves and others, with others. How can we help be that bridge? And I love that a lot of the threads I was hearing was like empathy, compassion, trust, even accountability, and just and like you said, presence. That's what it all boils down to me, is that presence, that you can bring all of that forward and be in that space like your grandmother was able to be, right? Even amongst the chaos, and be able to make you, even as a little girl, feel seen, feel heard, understood, and validated. I think just a tremendous gift.
It truly has been.
Yeah.
And then, this type of communication can be generational. You can pass it on to your children. Where we so often don't see this kind of, real communication being modeled. And so when it is quite powerful and quite empowering. When I go out for dinner and I see a family of 4 sitting there and all 4 of them are on their phones, it breaks my heart.
Yeah.
because there is, a depth of connection is lost out on in that
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
And, how can children have, or the youth have, a conversation, let alone a high stakes conversation when
Right.
it's not modeled. So I
Right.
would just submit that I've seen it play out in my own life with myself, and also with my son, who
Yeah.
now communicates in this way as well.
That's awesome. Would you be willing to share that story about your son we talked about
Oh,
the other
sure.
day, about how soulful listening, even from like a parent-child dynamic, how that can have an impact on their lives?
Absolutely. I'm happy to do that. So, I was a single parent from the time my son Jacob was 10 years old on. So, Jacob and I knew early on that it would be up to the two of us to finance whatever was going to follow high school.
Mm.
And so we would tune in for conversations, and this is the only way he and I have ever interacted with one another. And so he was 15 and we tuned in, both of us like really present. And I asked him, Jacob, what do you want for your after high school experience? And he just like resurrected himself and announced, Mom, I'd like to go someplace strong in math and science. And if I could, play on a good football team. Is there a place that has both? 15.
Wow.
From his 6'5", 300-pound stance, he commanded a life of possibility.
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
that I heard Jacob beyond his words, beyond his body language, to that deeply insightful part of him that's really
Mhm.
calling forth a life of great possibility. So it was time for inspired action.
Yeah.
And I mean, the Southern school kept popping up. And I went back to Jacob and I said, people are saying this Southern school. He goes, we should go. I'm going. We were living in Nebraska, cornfield in the backyard. And I was thinking, I didn't even know how I was going to pay for plane tickets, let alone be this gigantic athlete in a big city. But
Yeah.
somehow the universe supports you when you're up to something big and good.
Mhm. Yep.
and we ended up going to the Southern school. A couple of days later, we're meeting with coaches and students, and we eventually go to a park and we're walking. He looks down at me from his 6'5" perch and announces, Mom, I feel like I belong here. And that was
Wow.
it.
Wow. How
So,
powerful.
yeah. So, this, before the end of his junior year, he had earned a full scholarship. Jacob did
Wow.
all the work academically and physically. And he was the first boy from Nebraska to be recruited to play football for Georgia Tech.
Wow. That is awesome. That is
And then,
great.
yeah, and then he went on to do other pretty significant things, coached at the collegiate level, and most recently became a doctor of physical therapy and is a practicing doctor of physical
Wow.
therapy.
That is
And
so
so,
awesome.
yeah,
That is, I wish as I was hearing you tell that story, I was thinking, wow, at 15, I wouldn't have had a clue. I mean, I was so lost. And that's
yeah,
amazing that even at that age, how he was so connected to what his life path is. And that
yeah.
is just such a blessing. And if soulful listening can help facilitate that process, and how that story also beautifully demonstrates how that's such a great way to apply it even in a family dynamic. You don't have to be in organizations or in business or
Right.
leading large teams. You can make an impact even in your own family, as a parent, as a spouse, you know, even as a child. Hey, you know what? Start using soulful listening on your parents. Start using those techniques and start teaching them maybe better ways to communicate and really connect.
Mhm. I love that. I love that. And you mentioned leadership and leading. I mean, we can each be leaders of communication in our own
Mhm.
lives, whether it be in the work setting or in our personal lives or when we're in the grocery line.
Mhm.
Just imagine just acknowledging a person that is maybe in the food service industry in a really respectful, tuned in
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
It
It
yeah.
I was just smiling and really laughing because I just had a conversation earlier today with my boss about how using minor annoyances in life to really, really touch in and connect with that soulful listening, because a lot of
Mhm.
things are around us triggering us, right? Like life is not perfect. It's not, just stress free and we're all just kind of out, oh, let me connect to myself, right? Like it's not always easy. So use those little, like in a grocery store line. That's always my example, because I always get so triggered in a grocery store. But I'll often tell myself, like, okay, Jen, I feel like we're getting triggered right now. I can sense it. I can feel it in every fiber of my being. I know it's coming. What are some other possibilities here for whatever that annoyance is? Someone's taking too long, or,
Right.
whatever. What are all the other possibilities? So I start playing a game with myself to get curious. And I notice that it's helped me substantially, because I'm telling you, I am one of those like, come on, why do you have 12 items in the tent? No, 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 no. That's what are you doing? I can get really triggered. So it's just been a great way to even just connect to myself and go, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
like acknowledge ourselves. Say, Jen, yeah, you are really getting triggered right now and you're really upset. I can feel it. It's a tense emotion. What are some other possibilities that we have to work with right now?
Well, first of all, I want to just acknowledge what you said. This is a time of great tension
Mhm.
for virtually everybody, in many different levels and many different ways. And so the consciousness or awareness that we have of where we are, then we can kind of self-regulate
Yep.
a little bit,
Yep.
and that's important. And then also to be aware of how your emotions are affecting others. That's quite empowering.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, and I told myself, well, at least I feel better. I'm not like sitting here seething and like, oh, at least I feel better. And I'm just like, then you notice, then you can be in a space where you're just kind of present. You're just kind of looking around and seeing, all the stuff that goes on in a grocery store or an airport, just looking around, and I love to look in airports. Actually, it's another big trigger of mine.
Okay.
And I love just watching people.
Hmm.
I'll say to myself, I wonder where they're going. I wonder what they're up to today. I wonder if,
Yeah, that's
who they're going to see, or what they're, where
I
they're
like
flying
that.
to. So but again, getting to that space takes, I think, a lot of even that soulful listening with yourself. And just like you said, self-regulating and being able to
Right.
manage yourself so you don't completely just,
Lose it.
lose
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And also I would, offer the possibility of having a gratitude practice that you can
Mm.
bring into play in that moment of trigger,
Yeah.
because we cannot hold two opposing thoughts at the same time. And so there's psychology behind that, but we'll let that be.
Right. Right.
But anyway, to just, recognize that if you're having difficulty coming up with something, I would just offer to you the miracle of life itself. It's an absolute miracle that any of us are here in this moment, in this breath, in this time.
Yeah.
And so just sit with that for a moment. Yeah.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm having so much fun with this conversation. I could probably talk to you for like 5 hours, but I would love to hear a little bit more about some of the work that you're currently doing with soulful listening. How are you bringing that to the world? How are you bringing that to corporations? What does that look like?
Okay, so most recently, I've kind of honed in on doing keynotes. So that seems to be a really great way to scale the message, and
Mhm.
so that has been really delightful, and I've enjoyed doing that. And I just recently completed a TEDx talk, which is kind of a big
Yeah.
deal for me
Yeah.
anyway, and that will be released in January 2022.
Oh,
And yeah,
congratulations.
thank you. And so it feels like the message of soulful listening is one who has stepped into its time and place of being relevant to people. And my hope and efforts and intentions and actions behind it are to share this gift that was given to me early on and evolved throughout my lifetime.
Perfect. That is
Yeah.
amazing. And I feel like it is like the perfect time for all of this, especially as we're coming out of the pandemic. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of people have spent a lot of time reflecting on their life, what matters to them, what's important, what they need. I feel like this comes at a very perfect time for them, people to really start picking up some of those tools. And maybe that'd be a good way to segue into, so what would be like maybe one or two things from the soulful listening kind of model we talked about that somebody who's listening could walk away with and start implementing tomorrow, or something they
Okay.
can start kind of thinking about?
I'm a big proponent of start small, but start. And
Mhm.
so select one conversation over the course of this next week with a person that you are wanting to connect with on a deeper level. Don't necessarily go into a high stakes conversation the first time,
Yeah,
but
right.
pick one person, one setting, and then incorporate the elements of soulful listening. Do some self-care this next week.
Mhm.
Pick a couple of things that you're either already doing or that you are going to now do. And as you're doing them, tell yourself, I'm doing self-care. Maybe you're out
Mhm.
walking your dog, something you have to do anyway, but maybe notice something in your surroundings. Notice a tree or a
Mhm.
statue that you had never noticed before, but realize that this is part of self-care.
Yeah.
And then becoming fully present before you enter into that conversation.
Mhm.
Do the breathing, feel your body, maybe touch your fingertips together, whatever works for you.
Yeah.
And then listen in a way where you let go of the competing things that are ever present for all of us, but you
Mhm.
just put them to the side for this moment
Yeah.
and just experience what happens when you do
Mhm.
that with one
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. I love
Simply
it.
take a breath and listen.
Take a breath and listen. Sounds so simple. I actually am going to put a reminder in my calendar to remind me to focus on that before meetings. Take a pause, do some
Take
deep
a
breaths,
pause.
and
Yeah.
see if that affects how present I can show up. Because I was actually also smiling my head when you were talking about taking your dog for a walk, because I go for a walk in my neighborhood every evening. And it's amazing. There are some times where I'll just notice something and I'm like, when
Ah.
did that get here? And I'm thinking, I think it's been here for a while, but for the last couple of weeks, I probably just been so like in my head and my thoughts, not really paying
Mhm.
attention, that one day I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was there. And it's probably been there for a month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But but also labeling that as self care, like just a lot of the things we do, I don't think we realize that we're actually taking care of ourselves. And the
Mhm.
more we notice it, I think the more we can sustain it and put those things into practice.
Right. And that helps you to fill up, so to speak.
Yep.
When we
Yep.
talk about Grandma Helga, I mean, she would take time for herself. She would have a weekly women's group. And so when she would come into a conversation, she would come from the position of overflow. So you didn't feel like she was, pulling something from you. She was there.
Yeah.
And
Just
so,
there.
yeah, so realize that you are kind of filling your cup as
Mhm.
you're doing these things. And maybe even have a mental image of, okay, I did this and this and this. And then,
Yeah.
you know, pat yourself on the back.
That's
This is
awesome.
yeah, a gift you give not only to yourself, you give it to others.
Yeah. I think that is one thing that's missing a lot, I feel, is that gratitude piece. And sometimes I struggle with it because sometimes it can feel a little like cliche or something for me to say, oh, I'm grateful for this. But I like looking at just everyday things that we're doing and really trying to connect with it to kind of almost produce that gratitude naturally versus me feeling like I'm always forcing myself, like, oh, I should be grateful for my health. I should be grateful I have a job. I should be grateful I'm alive, right? Like, of course, those are things, but it doesn't feel, the same.
Mhm,
But I feel
mhm.
like what you're describing kind of, again, naturally kind of builds that gratitude, instead of having to force it and make it feel,
Right,
you know,
right.
kind of, I don't know. I always think of like cliches, like, I am so happy to be alive. And it's like, well, yeah, most of the time, right? I mean, I don't know. Things change day to day, minute to minute. Um, those minor annoyances I was talking about.
Right, sure.
But yeah, I think it's a wonderful practice. And, I love hearing the story about your grandma Helga. And she sounds like a wonderful human being. And I'm so honored for you that you were able to have that experience and then share all of that wisdom with us and the listeners. So I appreciate, going through that. And I wanted to shift gears real quick into this new segment I'm doing. I think I told you about this, about the leading questions, which are just really 5 questions to kind of get to know you a little bit better. So I wanted to dive into that, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
You don't mind. So the first question was about what book is on your bookshelf?
I have a lot of books on my bookshelf, but one that came to mind as you just asked that question is The Alchemist by
Oh,
Paulo Coelho.
uh-huh.
And, there are a couple of quotes in his book that I really, really like. If you don't mind me sharing those.
Yes, please.
Okay. So when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it.
Mm, it's beautiful.
And that's
I love
played out
that.
in my own personal life.
Mm-hmm.
And when you ask the question of, where should people begin and how can they incorporate, soulful listening in their lives, I'm kind of reminded of another quote of his, and it's, when we strive to become better than we are, everything around us becomes better too.
Wow. Sounds like a great book that I would like. I got to put that on my reading list. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I've read another book. It's called, I think, The Alchemy, but I think it's written by someone else. And I don't know if I have it on my bookshelf, but it was similar and it was mind blowing. I loved it. Um, Very cool. So what would you say is the genre of books that are usually on your bookshelf? What do you typically like to?
I'm all over the place. So of course, like psychology books and, emotional intelligence and
Mhm.
communication and all of those. And then I like mystery novels that keep me
Okay.
engaged, that have twists that I can't figure out from the beginning.
Mm.
I like to be surprised. And so that would be another one. And then, sometimes a romance novel is just kind
Mm.
of nice to dip into.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I'm all over the place too. I like the mysteries as well. I like the
Uh-huh.
when the plot goes in a direction that you didn't think it was going to go, and kind of, yeah. I don't read enough of those books. I think most of the books on my bookshelf have to be around kind of self improvement, but from
Hmm.
kind of like the self perspective, and also probably Buddhist kind of skew, more Eastern philosophies.
Sure.
But I like all kinds of books too. So, what is one thing you are most proud of?
Oh gosh. It would, when I look at a personal level, it would be, raising my son, from
Mhm.
10 years old on as a single parent. And although I cannot take credit for this, but the fact that he is, a well balanced, strong, contributing man. And he's, really committed to becoming the best version of himself. So when I look at that, it makes my soul smile.
Oh, he does sound like he's a great guy. Yeah, and that's a hard job. So well done. I honestly actually, admire single parents because, it's tough. And I've worked with a number of them over the years, and I've heard a lot of stories about how difficult it can be. So definitely hats off to you for raising
Well,
such a great human being. That's
he and I
awesome.
made a good team. And our personalities are compatible. So I think there was a luck of the draw there as well.
Yeah. Oh, well, so tell me about an influential person in your life and how they impacted you.
We've already spoken of her frequently, and
Yeah.
it's Grandma Helga.
Yeah.
Grandma Helga. And, one, oh gosh, one little piece of wisdom that she shared with me at
Mhm.
another time in my life. And I think I was, struggling with going on maybe to another level. And, I've funded my education. So it wasn't that she was there financially for me, but her wisdom was just so incredibly powerful. And I remember I was, like kind of tossing and turning, and I was, like in my early 20s at the time. And I think I was thinking of going on to maybe another level.
Mm.
And she said to me again, when she presenced herself, she said, Terri, all you have to do is decide what you want to do and
Mm.
then take steps to do it.
Yeah.
Bam.
It is very simple, isn't it? I mean, just having that, I call it North Star. What is my North Star? And then how am I going to direct the ship in that direction?
There we go.
That's awesome. You're so lucky that you had such a inspiring, impactful grandmother.
Definitely.
Oh, my grandparents, most of my grandparents were long gone before I could have that kind. So it's warming to hear. I like that. So if you could live anywhere in the world, where would that be?
That's such an interesting question to come at this point in my life. I spent the past year living all over the country. So I just put everything in storage, packed up my car, and lived in 10 different places over 10 different months.
Wow.
And put 10,000 miles on my car. And and I have loved something about each of the places. And I've learned that I need to spend time in nature, that's just part of who I am. And so I guess rather than a singular place, it would be the qualities of what I choose to experience when I'm in a place.
Wow. I like that. That's a good answer. And the final question is, what is the most important lesson that you have learned in your life?
It would be to listen and take action.
Wow. That's perfect. And that goes really well with the soulful listening and everything we talked about today. So I appreciate you doing that with me, having a little fun, answering some of those questions. It was great getting to know you a little bit more. And so before we end, where can people find you and how can they connect with you?
Thank you for asking that. And thank you for this lovely conversation. It's been so powerful and meaningful to me. So if people want to reach out to me, my website is really the best way. And it's Soulful Listening, one word, soulfullistening.com.
Okay. Cool. I will make sure to link that in the show notes of the podcast as well. I think you gave me some social media links as well to connect with you. And if interested in learning more about soulful listening or have keynote opportunities, definitely open door to reach out to you, I assume. So
yes, absolutely.
I'll direct people there. Yeah, it was such a pleasure talking today. And again, I have to thank Sean again for connecting us, because anytime I can have, dialogue with somebody who I just think like, oh my gosh, it's everything I feel in my heart and my soul and every part of me, it just fills my cup. It's definitely one of my self-care activities today. So I appreciate you being on this journey with me and being present with me today and talking about the wonderful gift you're giving the world.
Thank you so much. It's been a joy.